So go ahead, G. Go ahead and tell the folks who you are and what you do and what you're all about, and give us everything about you.
My background is as follows. So I actually got introduced to IT probably in 1998 or 99 when I was a freshman or sophomore at Tuskegee University. So I took this class, just some programming class. I want to say C++ at the time, but I ended up failing the class because I was just all kind of lost and confused, and then I was just kind of focused on some of the honeys that was in the class. So I really wasn't paying attention like I should. And,
distracted.
yeah. But overall, I've been in STEM in general since like 98 because I went to college to be an aerospace engineering student where I thought I was going to design, grow up to work for NASA, designing spaceships and rockets and all that stuff. Anyways, fast forward, went into the military. It was something I always wanted to do. Between my first college class taking IT stuff and me going to the military, I didn't do anything with IT. Like I said, I had dropped that class and just totally forgot about IT. But anyways, I go into the military. I wanted to join the infantry, but my uncle, he was in the Army at the time, and he convinced me not to join the infantry and pick a MOS that would have a high employability status after the military. So my initial MOS, military occupational specialty, it was called a 31 Papa. I think it's like 25 Papa now, but it was a microwave systems operator. And
wow. Okay.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's not the microwave that you warm your food up with.
No, it's totally different.
Yeah, I dealt with basically what they call tropo signals, where we would bounce line of sight signals. We would bounce signals off the atmosphere to establish communication. So I was one of the guys that was responsible for, doing all that stuff, right? After about 2 years of doing that, I got an opportunity, 3 years of doing that, I got an opportunity to reclass, become a 25 Bravo or 74 Bravo back then. That's the computer specialist. And so I ended up reclassing. From there, that's when I actually got my official kickoff into IT. It was probably like 2005. I did the entry-level stuff, the grunt work, I like to say, running around, plugging in network cables, creating user accounts, resetting passwords. I did all that. I was a system administrator at one point in my career. At one point, I used to work for the NSA when I was in the military, doing some secret squirrel stuff over there with their communication systems, where I was in charge of, I want to say, a quote unquote data center to a certain extent that was worth a few $100 million. That was like on the opposite side of my office, that I was in charge of making sure that all the circuits stayed green and, nothing dropped, because where I worked at for the NSA, without going into too extreme detail, because I probably still can't really talk about it, but
yeah.
And so I was in charge of a lot of that circuitry to make sure that it, all the lights stayed green and none of that stuff went down. And then we dealt with some other stuff. When I was in Afghanistan back in 2010, I was a service desk supervisor, where I was a part of a special team in Afghanistan to where we flew around from FOB to FOB, forward operating base is what that stands for. We would have to basically go to these new bases and revamp.
I was at Cobra.
Okay, I was based out of FOB Wilson, but they changed. Well, my main base was Kandahar, but the little hub that I was based out of was called FOB Wilson initially. Then they changed it to FOB Pasab, but then they sent me up north to a FOB TK Tarakout. But basically what we would do, we would go to these little bases, these little FOBs or whatever, and basically revamp their telecommunication system. So when we first got to FOB Pasab, I was attached to the 101st Airborne, right? They had internet access, they had telecommunications, but it was nowhere near as up to speed. They were still dealing with a bunch of line of sight communications. So we went in there, my team and the civilian contractors that worked for me. It was like 6 military personnel. Then I had like 30 contractors that worked for me. So we went in there, we set up help desk communications with them. And then we also established this thing called a TCF, stands for Tech Control Facility. And so for those of you who are, not familiar with this stuff, but a tech control facility is basically like, it's almost the equivalent of like an ISP, an internet service provider, in a way to where you can route all of the communications into this one quote unquote building per se. And then whether it's your coaxial cables, your fiber optic cables, or any other type of communication medium will come into this building. And then we will pump the signal up to a satellite dish and blast the signals out to space, and and basically just relay the signals all the way around the world. But our whole mission was to get these guys faster internet connections, not just so that people can call home and talk to their spouses and their kids, but so that the brass, the colonels and everybody out there could have, faster communication with the guys kicking in the doors, the Rangers and any other special forces people that was out there doing what they had to do. So that was like my main job, was just running around from fob to fob with my team, setting up all these communications. And so I did that for a year, 2010 to 2011, when I was in Afghanistan. And then I came back and I got out the Army in 2015. So I spent my last 4 years in the military as what they call an AIT instructor. So that stands for Advanced Individual Training. And so for those of you who are not military, basically AIT is the place that you go to after you do basic training to learn how to do the job that you signed up to do in the military. Yep. And so I was the guy that was responsible for teaching people who want to become computer tech guys how to do their job in the military as a computer tech guy. And so while I was there, I worked there for 4 years, and, between myself and obviously all my coworkers, but we ended up training like, I don't know, man, hundreds into the thousands of people that was just coming through over the course of 4 years on how to, learn basically entry-level IT stuff, everything from A+ certifications, Network Plus, Security Plus. We would teach them some basic stuff about Cisco networking, and then we would teach them some other quote unquote secret squirrel stuff that only pertained to military equipment. You know what I mean? So I did that for 4 years, and then I ended up getting medically separated from the military due to past injuries, because back in my younger day, I had injured myself jumping out of an airplane in airborne school. And so, I still graduated airborne school, but that injury haunted me for most of my career, which played a significant factor in, me basically not being able to meet the physical requirements of being in the military. So they ended up medically separating me, which was a blessing because, even though I'm not technically retired, I still get the same benefits as a retiree, minus the retired label.
Yep.
Everything they get, I get. I'm just not officially retired. And so after that, I used my GI Bill to go back to school as a full-time student, and went back and got my first master's degree in information technology with the emphasis on information assurance. And that's directly related to cybersecurity type of stuff. And then after that, I went back and got my MBA. And this was all paid for through my GI Bill, my post 9/11 bill. So they were paying me to go to school. So after that, I was living in Georgia at the time. So after that, I sold my house and moved back down to Florida. And then I started doing some work with this company that dealt with Fortune 500 companies. But my role that I got hired on, I was actually an IT researcher. What that meant was we would get all these clients, these big time company clients, and they would give us all of their IT products. And when I say IT products, I'm talking about stuff like, I don't know, ServiceNow or whatever it is, that the IT software that you use to maintain your organization so that they can conduct whatever activities that they're conducting, that, the stuff that the IT people would use. And I would have to get that information, and I would have to do like these deep dive analysis into what can these products do, what they can't do, compare and contrast them up against similar products so that they could take this information, package it up into these nice little packages, give it to the CIO, the CFO, everybody that sits at the executive suite, so that they can figure out if they want to reinvest or divest from a product or do this, that, and the third. And so I spent mad time learning about so many different areas of IT that were outside of my lane. Cause my main lane in IT is pretty much, the networking path, so, cause for those of you, when people think about IT, you gotta, in order for you to kind of visualize how many different lanes it is, just think of IT like the medical field. You got the medical field, you got plastic surgeons, heart surgeons, dentists, pediatrics, basically you got your own little specialties in the medical field, even though you have like a base layer of education, like everybody takes a biology class, but then you start specializing. It's kind of the same way with IT to a certain extent, where I do networking type of stuff, but you might have some guys who deal with just straight programming, some guys who deal with straight cloud stuff, which could tie into some other stuff. So my background is really networking. But so when I was working this one job doing this research, it gave me a glimpse into all these other areas of IT that I didn't really dibble and dabble in, to where I had to learn the software that they're using and I got so good to the point where I had a deeper understanding of their software than the people who actually worked at these jobs who were hired to manipulate this software, because I had to interpret all this data so that these companies can figure out if they're going to use this software or get rid of it, because this software can cost lots and lots and lots of money, man. I'm talking about tens of thousands, if not more, dollars for a software program to be licensed to a company to do whatever. So I did that, and then while I was doing that, I also taught at a tech college. So I
Wow.
would teach entry level IT because what it was, I got tired of doing that, and so I was trying to get hired as a college professor. Because I got 2 graduate degrees and all that other crap, so I met the requirements. But the only reason I didn't pursue that route is because I think basically they're trying to heavily encourage me to go back and get the equivalent of a PhD. For those of you who don't understand, there are various types of quote unquote PhDs. You got your PhD, which is like the highest you can get in the academic world. And then you got what is called an EDD, an educational doctorate. That's what they were wanting me to get. It's like I think it's the equivalent like a specialty type of PhD. It's kind of hard to describe, but basically they were wanting me to go back to school to try to do that. And I was just like, well, are y'all going to pay for it? Because I'm a fan of not paying for college. So anyways, that's what happened. So like I say, out of all the stuff that I've done in IT, the thing that I enjoyed the most was actually teaching IT. Like when I became an AIT instructor teaching entry level IT, I remember when I went through AIT to learn how to do my job, and I thought this was the worst thing in the world. But then when I became the actual instructor and I was on what they call the platform, basically I'm the teacher teaching, it was a whole nother thing when I saw like the little lights go off in people's heads when they started understanding the concepts that I was talking about. Because, I would get a bunch of people in who were brand new off the street. They didn't know anything about IT other than how to hit the power button on their computer to go surf the internet. Or I've had people who had some experience, but maybe they only had like limited experience. But then when we get to talking about this stuff, we get to explaining how the internet works or how computers work, how communications work, how basic security concepts work, yada, yada, yada. And then, I see the little light bulb go off in people's head. I was like, wow, okay, I can really dig in this because the information that I'm putting out here, these people can run with this information a million miles an hour. Like some of these dudes that was in the military with me, they would come in, they would learn the stuff in the AIT land. They would do their 2, 3, 4 years in the Army, get out, and then go out there and get jobs, starting off like $50,000, $60,000 a year, working for the federal government, or some of them would go overseas as a contractor like Josh did, or Keep It Techie. You guys want to talk about some major cheese, so let me rewind the clock back to, I deployed twice, but my second time I was in Afghanistan, right? So, we're talking about dudes who are coming out the military after a couple of years, after, getting some basic training in terms of IT to where they can get jobs starting off like, I don't know, like $30, $40 an hour. I had guys that were working for me in Afghanistan. Some of them never served in the military. Some did only a couple of years. They were making the lowest paid dude on my team that was a contractor was making $125,000 in 1 year with the first 100 like tax free. I had one dude on my team. He was getting paid almost $300,000. He was our information assurance dude.
Good Lord.
Just for 1 year's worth of work, bro. 300 racks, like the first 100 tax free. And with the option to quit at any time they want, because I couldn't quit. They would send me back to Kuwait and lock me up in jail on Camp Arifjan out there and then send me to Leavenworth. But these guys could quit, and we had dudes that actually did that. They would just quit in the middle of a contract and bounce. But the pay was ridiculous, and so I started making videos on my channel. It's called Tech G, just like my name right here.
I put your link. I put your link in there so anybody, you guys, y'all can click the link and subscribe to Tech G and Keep It Techie. Both their links are up top.
And so I said what I was going to do with that channel. I was just going to teach IT for free, entry level stuff, like starting with the bare bones entry level IT cert, which is IT fundamentals. Then I got a class. I put that up there. I got A+, and then I got to start working on Network Plus and Security Plus. But basically, I said I was going to put this stuff on YouTube for free.